Hey, it's Don, the Auction Professor here. Today we're going to talk about models. I know I've talked about different types of models, resin garage kits in the past, but this is just over-the-counter, regular standard old models. There's many that go for hundreds of dollars, even when they are assembled. Some people will buy them and actually pay somebody to assemble them and professionally paint them just for display. It's a standard practice. I've sold models and kits in the past where someone has bought them from me and asked me to send them to their artist painter instead of sending to them, and then they would see them once they were finished and being put together. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to go over to the screen right now. Today we're going to talk about models. Mostly vintage ones are the ones I look for. There are some newer ones that are worth money, but most of the vintage ones, if you find them still in the box, they're usually really good models to sell. Now, obviously, oddball topics like this one here is a set of the Beatles. The set sold for $2,000. These are legitimate costs of these items. Ravel made a limited number of these from what I can see. They weren't mass-produced to a huge extent like a lot of other models were. It was iffy. It's original. It's when the Beatles first got here. They don't show up very often. I still see them even assembled, and even assembled, these models can still sell for a few $100s if you get the right one and it's well done. It has to be well done. If it's painted, it has to be painted nicely. No glue overages or anything like that. But overall, vintage models from the 60s and before always sell for us. Next one here is a Renoir. This is a new old stock. Now, they say new old stock, but it's actually been opened. So that's why I kind of hesitant. I would never ever list something new if the box was open. These were all sealed originally, so it should have been new open box or something like that. So that's technically misleading on the description in my personal opinion. These old ones are really good though, either way. Plastic, it's like a inside of an engine. You'll put it together and it actually moves for the most part like an engine. Obviously you can't fire it up or anything because it's just plastic, but it's identical to an actual engine. Every little detail on this. So these sell for a ton of money. They don't show up very often. This is an airplane engine. Most of the engines that Renoir made were invisible, like car engines. So airplane engines are very scarce. And this is a Wasp engine. It's a very specific type. Very, very rare model. $2,300. Now, again, you're not going to run into all these types of models all the time. They're very, very scarce. You just have to know what to look for. The other deciding factor on some of these, like this glow-in-the-dark one here, the Mummy, Aurora redid a lot of these. So you will see remakes, rehashes, recastings of these same exact models. So you'll have to know the logo. So always, always look these up. Another thing that I see on these types of models is someone will find a box that's been opened, assembled, or whatever the case may be, and they'll just have an empty box. They'll buy a newer version of it, take those insides out, put them in the old box, and then seal it at home with, you know, the heat shrink wrap sealers and things like that. I see that a lot. There's no real way to tell for those who aren't going to open it. That's why the people get away with this. So you've got to be careful. Knowing how the wrap actually was when it was originally sealed is key to some of this. And it's usually, this is typical, there's usually that seam down the middle from the ones that I see, and if you're lucky, sometimes you can even pull and separate that seam if it's a vintage one, because the technology wasn't super back then. This one looks pretty legit to me, but again, there are some people that fake these out. They'll take the old box, as I said, and then swap it out. So this one's $1,500. Any of the horror, sci-fi, crazy tune style characters of the day always sells. Even if these were assembled, I still would buy them. Obviously, assembled models go for a heck of a lot less, but they're still great items to find. This is a Potcher. Now, I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced. That's just the way I've always pronounced it. They make a ton of different models. They're heavyweight, metal parts and things like that. They're very well detailed. They look just like the real thing. They're larger than most models as well. This is a quarter of the size of a real bike. It even has the support bracket or bike stand in the back. So, I mean, these are very detailed models. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're made in Italy, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the exact area, but maybe it says on here. Yeah, either way, it doesn't matter. They're just metal cars and pieces. The cars you'll find more often. Some of them aren't worth more than a few $100s, but a large chunk of them are worth thousands. Let's move in and I'll show you a few other ones. Here's another one. Same basic thing. This one's out of the box, it looks like, too. Let me see if the box is there. Nope, they have the box as well. So, again, $1,475. just pay attention to models. Whenever you see models. Renoir, here's another one. This is like the visible chassis. It's just the chassis of a car. That's it. These are for like car buffs and stuff like that, so you could see what's underneath the frame and the body and all that. I always thought these were interesting. It's got the gearboxes and everything you would find in the actual car if you bought a chassis of the day. So it's a pretty interesting one. That's why these sell more than most. They're very rare, very hard to come by. This actually looks like it's in the original shipping box as well. A lot of these are big models, and they were shipped in one single box on top of it. So you'll have the display box inside of another box. 1900 on that one, mind you. Now, here's another line. Now, vampires in, as I said, the Universal Studios and horror monsters sell very well. Now, there's several versions of these. Now, there's a comical version like this one, the Way Out version. There's also a version of like a vampire or vampirella riding a vehicle, and then there's versions of them just being as serious, like from the actual vintage horror movies. Now, all the characters come like that from Universal Studios. You'll find the Mummy, Wolfman Jack, Dracula, all of those, the werewolf. They're all in multiple versions of those. They've rehashed them many times, so you'll find recasts of these even up into the 90s and stuff. If I'm not mistaken, they still make a version of this right this minute, so make sure you know the version. Make sure you're double checking the label when you search these. Again, these are very scarce. You're not going to find these early ones like this very often, and it's certainly not going to find them sealed very often. I find sealed models quite often, but never really early ones. Usually they're from the 70s, late 70s or early 80s. Those are usually what I run into sealed. Now, I've got tons of models here up on a shelf here. Just haven't had a chance to listen, but they do sell even other ones too. Car models will sell, but they're not nearly as high as the sci-fi, the space, and the horror-related ones. Movie-related ones are always really good ones to sell, at least from my personal experience. This one's $1,305. Now, here's a, I believe this is a, yeah, Aurora too. Now, this is a later one, probably early 70s, maybe a little farther in. It's been opened again. It looks like somebody's actually shoved some bubble wrap and things in there. That's not how it would have been issued. Yeah, this one's been opened. Captain Company. Now, there's a Captain model or Captain Company. I think this is probably the same one that actually sold like kit bashes and things like that, and that's what this looks like it is. So this might be a deluxe model, something you couldn't just get off the shelf. You'd had to have ordered it, and this is probably larger than most of them. But again, this is a killer one. Some of these go for a ton of money. Captain model or this person here is someone who's known. $1,600 for this version here. The larger models are very scarce. So when you get to the large size cars, some of those can go for a ton of money. Now, here's what inspired me to do the trilobite. These are prehistoric scenes, basically dioramas from Aurora of the monsters and the prehistoric creatures. Now, I had Neanderthal Man. I had the prehistoric scenes, the far right one there as well, too. And I had the cave bear at one time. So I've had 3 of these when I was a child. I have fond memories of them, and that's part of why I designed my own stylized prehistoric diorama. This set sold for $1,300. One of these sells for more than the other one, and I think it's the cave one up on the top left, if I'm not mistaken. This came out when I was a child. I was like 5 or so when this came out. So this is what my parents bought us. These are the cheaper models, too. They're not as popular as the horror-related ones or sci-fi, but they were still good. Now, here's a Ravel. Any of these space-related ones. And this one, you can see it's been open. The box is out. There's pieces taken out. Whether it's there or not, the box and the majority of the pieces are. So this is a killer set. This one very rarely shows up. I have only seen one of these in my life. It was missing a ton of pieces. Didn't even get lucky enough to get that one. But this is $1,224. Here's another potcher. Again, car-wise, this is usually what the box looks like, the ones that I find. I've not gotten lucky enough to get a $1,000 one, but I've sold many of these for $300, $400, $500, $600. Not this specific car, but the same maker. So just keep that in mind on these. Next one here, this is the Mummy. Just gives you an idea. Now, this is the serious version of the mummy. Now, as I said, there's a comical version, and there's one of him riding a car. There's a glow-in-the-dark version as well, and then numerous recastings that were issued throughout the years on these. So make sure you have the right one. Most of these you find a comp on eBay, so you won't have to worry about pricing-wise or being able to figure out which one's which. There are differences in the original ones versus the new ones, so as long as you pay attention, you should do just fine. $1,157. Next one's another set, Lindy. Now this is another version. I think this is Lindbergh ones. Now Lindy Loonies, it's a takeoff on Lindbergh, which was the toy line. They made all kinds of stuff, mostly airplanes and cars and things like that. All of these comical ones sell, and that's where the horror, like Dracula and Frankenstein riding the cars, came from these here. This set sold for $1,100. They're a couple of $100 a piece, so even if you don't find the whole set, obviously, any individual one's going to sell for you, as long as they're originals. Again, even put together, I have sold model sets of these. Here's another one. This is another vampire one, just basically the same kit, so we're going to fast forward on that one. Here is another really oddball one here. This is a Renoir Cosmorama. Now, this is like a whole setup, like a little base station you would set up and build. It's a larger model kit. It's very scarce. I have not run across this one. I've only seen a couple ever sell. $1,000, that's about average, even if it's not all there. If you have majority of the parts, they still will sell. And they do make some recasts, so people who have these have cast some, and they'll cast and sell missing parts so you can finish a set on these. So it's not odd to buy a incomplete one as long as it's rare. Now, like, let's say you find a whole bunch of box sets and they're missing all kinds of pieces. I usually put those together in like a junkyard lot. People will put together even assembled cars that are damaged and stuff. They'll buy them and make a junkyard scene is what they do with those. I've sold many cars like that just for junkyard scenes. Now here's another sci-fi. Any of these sci-fi, late 1950s, early 60s. This is the space station from the day. You can see it's maybe not even all there. I don't know if they've checked it out. I don't know what's missing. The point is, it doesn't really matter on some of these sets. People will still buy them. The boxes are incredibly scarce. And again, you have to watch out if you find a sealed one, because most people are not going to open it. So you can get scammed. You'll sell it to somebody else without knowing. Maybe they'll open it up later on and want to put it together. And then you're going to have a problem if somebody did that to you. So always pay attention to it. Look for any signs that they were resealed. Here's another one, Battling Betsy. Now, they used to call the tanks something, the soldiers, so this is another one that's pretty scarce. Now, I've had some of these before, these model ones. The ITC, Ideal Toy Company is ITC, if you're not familiar. The motorized ones are usually scarce. They usually cost a lot more money. They didn't make as many of them because kids just didn't have the money for it, and parents didn't spend a ton of money on motorized toys. Some of them are motorized with rubber bands, some of the planes and things like that, but this is a different case. This probably has a battery-powered electric little tiny motor in it, would be my guess for this. So again, these do sell. They are worth looking for. I always look for these. There's even some G.I. Joe from the large size G.I. Joe, and even some from the 80s G.I. Joe, the 3 3/4 figures. There's a motorized tank, and those sell as well as the models here you see. So anyway, this one went for $900. Now here's a different, something different to look for. This is actually a display model made by Aurora to actually display in the store to market the item. So sometimes when you find a pre-assembled one, it might be better than just a normal one. And sometimes like this, when you find these, you always got to double check to make sure it's not a display model. Most of the stores at the end of the day, when they sold the models or the models were discontinued, they would sell the display kit too. Most companies like Aurora wouldn't ask for it back. It wasn't worth the postage. Just let the guys do whatever they want with it. That's usually what the case is. $900 on this one. Now, there's a ton of model kits for actresses and actors and TV shows and things. Most all of them carry some value. So if you're only paying a couple bucks for any model, you're usually pretty good. So an average car model from the 70s or 80s may only be worth, say, $5 or $10 on eBay. So just keep that in mind. Now there's wooden models. Here's a perfect example. Some are embellished with metal parts. This one's a strictly wooden model with metal parts and brass and some plastic fittings. So this one's a little better than most. $900. Now you can find plain models that are made out of wood. You can find, geez, you name it. Even boxcars for railroad trains you can find made out of wood. Even buildings made out of wood. Even buildings made out of metal and things like that. Whatever you're looking for, you can find them in the model market. Sergil, this one here is Sovereign of the Sea. Any of these early ship models sell very, very well. Scale-wise isn't important. The bigger, though, the better they are, at least from my personal experience. Now, here's an original Star Trek. Now, Star Trek, you can usually tell by the text of the word Star Trek. They changed the text on the box later on, so this is one of the original 66. This is the very first issue when the show had just been on for a little while. You know, this is key early Star Trek item, $875 $875. There's not a lot of these available. Usually there's 67, 68, 69s. I don't know if I've ever seen a 66 dated version of it. It's legit. The box looks good. Bubble wrap, or the wrapping on it, looks pretty decent to me. It does look like it's an original one. I would have to take a closer look in person, but it does look pretty good to me. It has the NBC TV. That's what you want to look for on these. This is the heyday of Star Trek. So any of these early ones sell. Even put together, they can still sell, just as I said. So models in general we do very well in. So the Bride of Frankenstein, again, a killer one. Now, just to set the record straight, a lot of people think the monster is Frankenstein. The monster is not Frankenstein. It's Dr. Frankenstein. So, you know, he made the monster. It's just kind of generically turned into Frankenstein, or the Bride of Frankenstein. It's not actually Frankenstein's bride. It's another second monster, bride of Dr. Frankenstein for the monster. So just FYI, a lot of people get that confused because Frankenstein, as I said, is the actual scientist that made the evil monster. So 830. Is this one sealed? Yeah, this one does look like it's sealed. Now, again, even if it's not sealed, it's still worth getting. So either way. And this is one of the better ones here. As I said, there are several different versions. You will find several. Yeah, this one is open. You'll find several different versions even of this model here. Always make sure they're there if you're selling them. If you have the instructions with a way to tell, do part by part to make sure it's all there. It might take you 10, 20 minutes, but do it. You'll make more money. It'll sell better. You won't have an unhappy customer when they buy it. 830 on this one. Now, here's another one. This one's like top of the line. This one's huge. This one's 60 inches across. So basically a 5-foot model. It's made out of aluminum. It's better than most every one I see. Most of these aluminum airplanes are made for like travel agents and airports and, you know, airplane companies in general, you know, office manager desk pieces and stuff like this. This is a very exclusive one. This has a cutaway for the inside, so you can see the layout inside of the airplane. It's got some wear, some dirt. I wouldn't want to clean it myself either. A very, very neat custom piece here. Usually you can't see the inside cabin on these, so that's why this one went for $7,500. I would not say this is a scam. I would say someone saw this up immediately, saw the price, saw what it was, knew how rare it was, and bought it on the spot. So you will run into these occasionally. You might have to spend $500, $600, $700 for not this version, but for just a solid metal one from you know, 60s or thereabouts. So just be careful when you buy them. There are a few newer versions of some of these models too, but this is the top end. This is the primoest model you will ever find in my book. I've never seen one go for this high before. I mean, sometimes they'll go for $4,000 or $5,000 for something similar, but not like this. This is just a monster-sized ship. So anyway, $7,500. Now here's another one of the comical ones I was talking about. This is Wolfman Swag, and it's him riding a little car, basically. So this is just another example. As I said, there's several versions of this. Glow-in-the-dark versions, modern versions. Just be careful what you're getting. And like I showed you in the other video, you can see the seam. If I see that seam across the back of a model, I'm usually pretty confident that it's original wrapping. That other one I was a little hesitant on, again, because people do re-wrap these. You've just got to be careful. $2,643. And the last one here is just another comical one here. Just a typical example of what you see. Anything for extra money. They were selling 3 or 4 sets of Dracula specifically at the same time. You know, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Any of those horror monsters sell very well. And as I said, anything movie-related sells. Star Wars, Star Trek. The older, the better. Crazy ones, oddball ones. The Munsters, if you find the Munsters car, that's worth some money. Even newer ones like the Ghostbusters Eco 1, the actual vehicle, the their hearse or ambulance that they drove around to scene, even that's worth some money. New ones are good. It just depends on what you find. Now, the average, like, Star Wars model kit, you may get $15-20, but there are some, like Slave One, Boba Fett ship, that you'll get a lot more for. So do your comps, do your homework. I'm showing you the high end. I'm showing you what the potential is. If you're not looking for them and trying to source these, you're really missing out. I buy most of these at either estate sales, flea markets, or local live auctions. Now, I can find models almost any sale I go to. I can find a model. So just buying and finding the right ones are key. So but that's what I have for you today. Just spend your time researching it. Look for these. Search these out. You will find some vintage models. You will make some money on them, but you got to know what to look for, and you got to do some comps, and you got to look for them. Well, there you go. There's another item that I look for. I've got dozens and dozens of models in the house right now. Still to list. Didn't get them up in time for the holidays with my son's issues, but again, these things sell all year round. If you get the right ones, you'll sell them very quickly. Vintage sci-fi are always the best. More detailed kits, the better. So anyway, that's what I have for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.